All right, everyone, welcome to today's episode of Empowered in Health. I am so excited to have my friend Natalie Richards here today. She is a mom of five, a wellness coach. She works a lot with women on their health and wellness journeys. I have had the privilege of getting to know Natalie over the years through our wellness businesses. And I am so excited for her to kind of jump in, share her story today, talk a little bit about the work she does, and just give us some really great tips and tricks on, healthy habits, implementing joy in our days, right? And really focusing on how do we take care of ourselves as women. So Natalie, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Yay. Thanks so much for having me, Erin. I'm so excited to be here. A little nervous, but very excited to chat with you. You just make everything so much easier, I think.
Oh my gosh, you're so kind. You're so kind, my friend. It's all like my big goal here on the podcast and for guests that I bring in is just to have like real raw conversations, right? We talk about real life. We talk about, what we're managing as women, as busy moms. And I'm just so grateful for you to be here to just share your story.
Yeah, thank
Um,
you.
so I'd love to kind of just dive right in. I'd love to kind of talk first, Natalie, about kind of you, right? Talk a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your personal wellness journey.
Sure, yeah. So, like Erin said, I'm a mom of five, which was never the plan. I was a career woman through and through. So I was an engineer working in Washington, D.C. Met my husband there after working for a few years. And we had, I just like loved the corporate world. I loved engineering. I loved the problem solving. That was me through and through. I thought I would be climbing the corporate ladder. Like I wanted to run this division of this large corporate engineering firm. I had big goals with that. And I found I'm like an achiever. Like I love moving through those ranks and getting the recognition and the raises and all that. Met my husband. He is from a small town in Oregon, which is actually where we live now. Um, and met him in DC and kind of teased actually that like if he was because we didn't really know each other yet on our first date, like if he drove a truck, like I thought that was so cute because like nobody in Washington DC would drive a truck or be
I
a
love it.
country boy or anything. And then turns out he's like, my truck's outside. I was like, okay, I'm gonna marry you. We did, and yeah, so had our first baby, and that's when like life really changed for me. So went from this like corporate engineering world, then had our first baby, and we lived in this little condo in Washington D.C. And I remember like looking out. My mom would fly in from Minnesota to watch our son, which is incredible. And I remember looking up to the window of our like two-story condo and seeing her standing there holding my tiny baby because I went back to work very quickly because that's all I knew. And I was like, want to go back. And it just pulled at my heartstrings. And I was like, I don't know that I can be away from him. It's a long commute every day, this much. I would run up the stairs and like the chaos of trying to feed him after pumping all day, all that was just a lot. And so my
Yeah.
husband and I started talking. Kevin and I had decided, is this really how we want to raise our kids and the life we want? And it was a hard adjustment because I thought, career woman, that was all I imagined for so long.
Right.
Um, and yeah, so actually, when our son was 6 months old, we sold our condo in Washington, D.C., and bought 120 acres in Central Oregon across the road from his parents. And we started farming. And I kept my job part time. So I worked part time as an engineer then for, gosh, like 6 more years, which was not the plan.
Right.
I was going to give it up, but I was, thank goodness, able to keep that and kind of keep that piece of my identity while I figured out life in this small town. So now I'm a stay-at-home mom of five kiddos. So we had the three boys and then decided, you know what? We're on this farm. Let's have one more kid. And
Yeah.
Erin, it's so funny because we were together,
Yeah,
right? And
totally.
you were pregnant too.
Totally.
Like maybe I think I can't remember if you even knew yet. But yeah, then I
Yeah.
left that trip where we met and found out that it was twins. It was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. Okay, five kids. So yeah. Um, Now I work part-time at home. The kids are here most of the time. And then I do wellness coaching. And so I'm partnered with health and wellness company and do that virtually and is a bit of a lifeline for me just to have
Yeah.
that outlet. And actually, Erin, in your episode that you talked about your grandfather, you talked about growth and like continuing to keep learning. And that I think is why like my engineering work, I wasn't feeling like I was learning anymore. I was stagnant in it and I was getting
Right.
bored at home. And so that's when this health and wellness piece came in and I was so curious about it and
Right.
just loved learning more. And so that's kind of where now it's been almost 6.5 years, I think, is what it's been. And it's just
Yeah.
like I love to learn and to, do the camaraderie with other women. And otherwise it's lonely at home. It can be really tough.
Yeah.
So
You hit
Yeah,
the nail on the head. Like it can be super lonely at home.
yeah,
And I love hearing more of your story, just kind of what you were doing and what you were doing for work and kind of what you thought you essentially wanted. And then how that transition to motherhood just really changed your perspective, right? It changed a lot about, what was important to you. How did you want to raise a family? It's interesting how we get kind of that jolt into a different kind of perspective, right?
yeah,
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit, Natalie, about kind of taking care of you, right? Like you're a busy mom of five.
yeah.
You've gone through quite a few transitions with adding new kids to your family, moving, transitioning to a farm. You have a lot going on. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, that transition to motherhood, and kind of what taking care of yourself really looks like and why it's important to you.
Yeah. So again, this kind of changed over time for me too. So I was always when it came to taking care of myself, I was like yo-yo, all in, all out. I'd train
Right.
for a half marathon and then I would do nothing for months. Then I would like find some new diet that I heard about, keto or whatever it was, and like go all in with that and then go all out again. And it was a lot of up and down, and it was fine for like that time in my life. I'm sure I could have felt significantly better if I'd learned about consistency back then.
Right.
But I felt like I had energy and I could, go about the day bringing joy and feeling pretty good. And then it was actually after my third baby boy. I actually remember so distinctly sitting on the couch right here in this living room and watching, I'm going to cry just saying it,
Yeah.
watching my three little kids, my little boys, play in front of me and thinking like I had worked half a day and then tried to find more time to work. And then, just so exhausted. My husband's farming, so he's gone a lot if it's,
Yeah.
during the farming season.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, I have no energy. I deserve to sit here on the couch and just relax while you guys play. And I remember them like asking me to play. And it wasn't like this is the first time this happened. I'd been
Right.
doing this for a while. And my youngest was young. So like there was this postpartum feelings and everything. But I realized that something like really had to change because one, going for a run on and off wasn't working with three kids. I can't push that triple stroller.
Right.
Um, and yeah, I find it just was like something has to change. I can't keep doing this. I
Right.
can't keep giving myself this excuse. What I deserve isn't to sit on the couch. What I deserve is to like really show up for my kids and to be this mom that I kind of envisioned I would be, right? Like full of energy and fun. And like that's always been, I always tease that like my parents raised me as a fun haver. Like I like to have a great time.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't doing that for my own kids. And so that's kind of when things changed for me in terms of like, what does taking care of myself look like? I started with just like a little online challenge and broke it down to 21 days, which was very much my personality because it was like,
Yeah.
sure, I'll do 21 days and then I'll quit
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
But this time I engaged in the community and I did the personal development. I started like I thought that was hocus pocus. Like I did not
Yeah.
know. I was not interested in it. And
Right.
boy, is that exactly what I needed.
Yeah. Me
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just started doing that and I started to learn that, I needed to change my habits, my routines, really make it part of my life. And I had for so long thought of it as a project, like, I'm going to train for this race and then I'm done. And I really thought like, when do you just get to be done with this? Like you
Yeah.
can work out and then you're good to go.
Right.
I just could not wrap my head around this is going to be a lifestyle and forever because it bothered me. I just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have to do that. Of
Right.
course, like they say all these cliche things of like learn to love the journey, but man, that's the truth. I
Yeah.
needed to learn to enjoy it and find and slow down and figure out why I felt good when I did it or how I felt. And so, yeah, it's kind of slowly started to learn about habits, learn about my mindset. And it wasn't all at once. It took, I mean, it's something you always work on, right?
Yeah.
6.5 years later, I'm still working on it. Still struggle with my nutrition here and there, but really taking care of myself now means a lot of things, but showing up for myself daily. And it's always move my body some way. It's always pour into my mind some way. Um, and I'm really trying to slow down in the mornings. I think as moms, we just like move through. We have so much on our minds and our plates, and we move through those things, our to do list so fast. It's
Right.
hard to pause and say, what do I need today? What's going to bring me joy? How can I bring joy to my family? And so that's the piece that I'm trying to weave in now. And that's, I think, the biggest piece of taking care of myself is like that slowdown.
Yeah. That's such good advice because we're all guilty of it. we just kind of get into that mode, especially in the connected society we live in, right? There's just always that go, go, go mentality and do more and connect more. And we forget how powerful pausing can be, right?
Yeah.
So I love that, Natalie. That's so powerful and so important. And great encouragement for us as moms, because I think back to kind of what you said earlier when you're sharing your story, like we can get into that headspace of not really believing that we deserve to feel good, that we deserve not to feel guilty for taking the time that we need. And so much of that can come from just giving ourselves that permission and that pause. So thank you so much for that perspective. So incredibly important. Natalie, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you do as a wellness coach, right? You and I have connected through our wellness businesses, and I know you're super passionate about coaching women and supporting women with some of the things that you've learned, right? When it comes to habits, when it comes to pouring into yourself daily. So talk a little bit about what you do as a coach and how you support women.
Yeah. So for me, the biggest piece, because this is what I struggled with, is when I'm helping women, I want to kind of slow down and back up about the setup piece of this, because a lot of times we'll jump into these 21-day groups. I usually run like a monthly themed idea, and I love a challenge. Like I said, I love a project,
Yeah.
and learning that I am not a project, but that I can actually break down some of these things into little projects that keep it fun for my like scattered brain mom of
Right.
five life.
Right.
So before we hop into that, I really like to slow down and kind of talk to my clients about what those things that I was saying before is like, okay, let's talk about like how you got to where you are now. But I don't like dwelling on it. I like just acknowledging and saying, okay, this is how we got to where we are. We're not going to beat ourselves up for how we got here, but we're going to acknowledge it, and then we're going to move forward. And for me, I think we can kind of like get in our heads about that, like beat
Yeah.
ourselves up about, well, like, why did I let myself go like this? Or I haven't taken care of myself forever. And I really like to say, look, this is a starting point and we're going to move forward. And so we kind of start there. We talk through, again, the beginning is really important for me. And then, of course, the consistency. How are you going to work this into your routines?
Right.
All these little pieces,
Right.
setting up the routines. I actually have like some of my sheets here that I use. But I really like to say, here are your couple goals of habits you're going to create. How do we make them part of your daily routine?
Yeah.
And not, I don't know if you do this, or I've done it a lot, and a lot of my clients do it too, is we'll say like, well, I did it before. I, got consistent before, or I lost the weight if that's what they're trying to do, or I, trained for the half. Like, why can't I do it now? And I think that, yes, it's helpful to look back, but it's also can mess with your mind because we're not the
Yeah.
same as we were the last time we did this. We
Right.
have new circumstances. We have, we have knowledge that we learned, but trying to go back and replicate that, I think takes us away from being a beginner. And it's so
Yeah.
important to be a beginner and to
Yeah.
start like fresh. Me, I have to start and be a beginner. Even, I've been doing it for 6 years. Every month I start back and I say, okay, how am I going to work this into my routine? What time of day is this going to be? What's important to me? And so I just walk through mostly with my clients. That front end is so important, but then always going back to it.
Yeah.
Every month going back to it, every couple of weeks, and figuring out, okay, why am I here? How am I trying to feel? So that's like kind of the background of it. I'm certainly not a fitness expert. I am not a nutritionist. I'm more of someone who wants to help with the setup of creating habits and
Yeah.
to just kind of changing our daily routines to support who we want to be.
I love that. And just again, that reminder of who you once were is maybe not who you are now. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily broken or that you can't be successful. It's more about just tweaking the strategy,
Yeah.
and really digging into what's going to serve you in this season now. I love that, because it's something that we can so easily beat ourselves up for no reason.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to the next question, Natalie, which is, when you're talking to women, when you're having the conversations about health and wellness, building habits, really taking care of yourself from the inside out, what are the struggles or the hurdles that you hear most often, or what are you really talking about with the people that you're speaking to?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is what we just touched on, which is like, why can't I do it this time? And I
Right.
did it last time. And I think kind of breaking through of our past doesn't define us. What are we going to do moving forward? How can I create the habits that I want to create? So I have a lot of people that will say like, it's just not working for me. And
Yeah.
even I do that sometimes. Like I'll be in a
Totally.
certain program and I'm like, oh, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Okay, does it not work for me, or do I just need to make some adjustments onto, what I'm doing, or is it my mindset? Like
Yeah.
how often is it something that we're doing in our minds? Like, is my goal the right goal? It's not necessarily what you're doing isn't working for you. Like, let's go back. How do you feel? Do you have
Yeah.
energy? What other things are off? It's not always, just this isn't the right program for me or whatever it is. So I think it's, I mean, 99% of the time for myself and for my clients, it's our mindset. It's not necessarily, the weight isn't coming off for this reason. Of course, there's so many factors with that, right? But I just think we try to go back and say, okay, well, how are you feeling? Let's focus on how you're feeling. And then some of these other things that you want are going to happen along the way when we focus on the habits that will get you to feeling the way you want to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, I'd love for you to speak on this a little bit too, is just this idea of the habits, right? What are the key habits and what can we do to really help each other? So I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about, when you're talking or thinking about habits for your groups or habits that you talk about with the women that you serve, what are like the key 3 to 5 things that you're really talking to others about?
Yeah. So in my groups, like right now, we're doing kind of a play on 75 hard. We're doing a 25 hard-ish challenge. And the idea there is that we're taking those basic habits that we all know we should be doing every day. And then we just, even myself, don't do them all the time. So things like
Right.
just getting your water in, focusing on sleep, like they're all the things that are going to play into how you feel every day. One of my favorite ones is that we're including 10 minutes of reading. And in this case, it's not reading like a novel. We're working on some sort of personal development or listening to something. Because it's, February right now, we're doing a focus on love. So if
Right.
you want to, you could do like 5 love languages or love languages for kids or something, but something
Yeah.
to help you learn and grow. Um, Atomic Habits is like my all-time favorite. I'm a systems person as a
Yeah.
former engineer. Like I
Yeah.
love a good system. And I think for me that like the whole health and wellness stuff clicked for me when I could put it into a system. And while
Yeah.
we are not, like I said, we're not a project, we're not a system, but if we can make these health and wellness habits part of our routine. So the water, linking it to other things we already do. Same with moving our bodies. And it doesn't have to be a physical intense workout. It could just be a walk, but it's a habit that we're going to do every day in some way. Even if we can
Right.
just show up a tiny bit, the reading of some sort of personal development or listening. I think as moms, that's a lot easier to listen to something than it is
Yeah.
to read. Um, and then nutrition, I think, is really important, but not overcomplicating it. I've
Mhm.
gone every direction with that. I like a system. I like the calculations, but I think for if we're really just going to work on a habit, is it one thing at a time? Can you just add more protein to your breakfast? Is that what you're
Right.
going to do, or whatever it is? But we try to include something with nutrition, but it doesn't mean follow this program 100%.
Right. I
Yeah,
love
and then
those things.
and then
Oh,
I
go
should
ahead.
point out gratitude. Honestly,
Yeah.
the morning time, and I've elaborated on like I do more in the morning than just gratitude, but it started for honestly 3 or 4 years of just 3 things I'm grateful for specific every day. And that it's wild how that has gotten me through so many hard times because I was just doing that little thing.
Yeah. That's such a good reminder. Um, I think sometimes in the health and wellness space, especially, and I'm guilty of this, is like you get into that headspace of feeling like, well, what's my next goal? Or how am I reaching to this or that? Or, what am I working towards instead of really making sure that you're refocusing on, but what do I have now?
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
being grateful for that and staying grounded in that, because at the end of the day, we have today. And all we can really control is what we're doing right now. And so staying grounded in what you have and being grateful for that
Yes.
is such a powerful habit to practice. So I appreciate that so much, Natalie.
Mm.
I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you've talked about habits, you've talked about your own personal journey, you've talked about coaching. You've shared a little bit about some of the things that you've started to implement and learn along the way and kind of grow into. I'd love for you to share maybe something that you've learned that you wish you would have maybe learned or known a little bit sooner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. Um, so many things, Erin.
Yeah. I know so many,
Um,
right? I have so
yeah.
many too.
Yeah. There's a lot. So I think some things I wish I would have learned earlier, like I was saying, the gratitude piece is like simple gratitude every day. I overlooked the mindset stuff. Like I said, I thought it was like hocus pocus. I just didn't know really what it was, but it's like
Yeah.
growth, right? Can you grow? Can you learn and be curious and change, all the information you have every day? And so, um, doing the gratitude practice, one thing I've added to gratitude that I wish I would have done earlier is that I actually write down, like, I do 4 things that I can find joy in the day that's coming up. So in the morning, I'll write down, okay, what are 4 things that I can find joy in today?
Yeah.
And I try to be a little specific. It's like, okay, well, I have this podcast with Erin. Yes, like I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ada has dance tonight. I love seeing her dance around. I think it's the cutest thing, watching her skip, not knowing
Right.
how to skip. It's so funny. So like all those little things of like, okay, Kevin and I are going to have like our little gathering meeting tonight. Like I have that. So
Yeah.
thinking about where I can find joy in the everyday, like we go through a lot of stuff of basic things that we have to do for our families, but finding and pausing to find the joy in it.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I would have done that my whole life. Like I
I
can't
know.
imagine, those times that were harder, those times that were stressful. I wonder how I would have handled them if I had known to like look for the little bits of joy.
Yeah. That's so good. Something that we all learn along the way.
Yeah,
I would say something that we all learn along the way, sometimes the hard way, right?
yeah, yeah.
So I love that. I would love for you to talk a little bit, as a coach and, thinking about the conversations that you have with women and, people that are looking to really change their habits or work on their habits. What would be your best piece of advice you would give to someone who really just wants to commit to starting their health journey and just kind of create it into a lifestyle like you've talked about?
Yeah. So I kind of walk people through a couple steps, but I think the first thing is while we work on your health, also work on like loving who you are now. And I
Mhm.
think that is hard. I think that I think I mean, a lot of us growing up, everything, we are always working on or focusing on how we were going to change. And I think we didn't pour enough into, okay, loving myself now. What can I find that I love now while I work on this change? So that's kind of step one. Um, Again, like when we're looking for it, we find it. So I think like when you're looking for joy, you're going to find it, focus on that. Um, Figure out the type of person you want to become. I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of times we are, I mean, I'm so guilty of this. I want to lose 5 pounds. I want to lose 10 pounds. That's going to feel good. No, what kind of person do I want to become?
Yeah.
And maybe it's somebody who loses 10 pounds, fine, but who am I going to be? How am I going to show up? I want the energy. I want to, be someone who's a light in the room. And
Yeah.
when I focus on that, and I want to encourage, my clients to do that, who do you want to become? Then we can identify the habits that will get you to become that person.
Yeah.
And kind of like, I think like start with 1 or 2 habits, right?
Yeah.
We might want to make a big change, but let's start with 1 or 2 habits, figure out how we can do it in your routine and don't do it alone. I think
Yeah.
I running, especially like when we moved to the farm and I was pushing the double stroller at the beginning, I was signing up for races then on my own. Back when I was really loving running, I was signing up with my best friends, my roommates, my college friends. When you do things with other people, it's more fun, you're more
Yeah.
successful. And I don't mean you have to work out together every day, but like we do in our groups and things, there's the
Yeah.
camaraderie there and it makes what can be so lonely fun, encouraging, and keep you going. So I think just don't do it alone would kind of be my last tip there.
Yeah, having community matters in so many aspects of our lives, but especially when it comes to health and wellness, because like you said, it's a lifestyle that we have to kind of make the choice to create. And with that comes, a lot of slow change and a lot of different habits to kind of trial and error a little bit to figure out what works for you. And I love that. And it's a good reminder again for women to remember like the power of community and
Yeah.
leaning into just having support when you really are looking to prioritize your health, get into a journey, get into habits, get into a program, whatever that might look like,
Yeah.
and just kind of feel empowered to do that. So I love that. Thank you so much for that, Natalie.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple other quick questions, then we'll kind of
Sure.
wrap it up.
Yeah.
So one of the things, if you guys don't follow Natalie, she's going to share all about how to find her on social, etc. But Natalie shares a lot about like, how do you infuse joy in your day, right? Like, what are you doing day in and day out to really make sure that you're staying grounded in those things that she's already talked about, like gratitude, joyful habits, or remembering like, how can I pull out those things that are going to really fill like my happiness tank, if you will, right? She shares all about those things on her social, and I love her so much for it because it's just such a powerful reminder for us to remember that there's so much that we need to be grounded in now as we strive for more or strive for change. So Natalie, I'd love for you to share a little bit about, you've shared a little bit here already. But as far as like finding the joy with a busy household, right, of 5 kids, do you have any best like tips, tricks, or things that have worked best for you that you would kind of share with someone else?
Yeah, I really think that the first step is, and gosh, it seems so simple. I feel a little embarrassed to say it, but pause and figure out what really does bring you joy.
Yeah.
I think that, again, we get so caught up in the day-to-day stuff, we can be complacent in what we're doing. And I think if we pause to say, like, what brings me joy, sometimes that's hard to answer a little bit. It's like, well, what used to bring me joy? Sometimes that's
Right.
nice. Like, I have to think back to when I maybe didn't have as many obligations and I could just like have time to do what I wanted to do. Then I can think of, okay, what does bring me joy? And can I do that now? So,
Yeah.
like, I think about like in college, right? I would have the music up and I'd be dancing around and we would be, getting ready for the night. Now it's obviously different. We're like getting ready for school, but
Right.
I love to turn on the music and man, it sets the stage in our house. Morning is stressful. I mean, I drive 5 kids to 3 different schools. It's crazy. But when I put on the music and everyone, of course, someone's going to complain about what song I pick, but at least we can kind of find, I don't know, some like release in that. Everyone can kind of dance around, they de-stress, calm down a little bit. So I think pausing and figuring out what brings you joy and then figuring out how to put that into your day to day is really
Yeah.
going to get you. And it can be simple. And in fact, it should be simple. I
Yeah.
think that's, of course, there's big things. Like I would love to go skiing more, but sometimes that's hard to put into my schedule.
Right.
So please do that. If you can do it every week or every month, wonderful. But maybe instead it's going for a walk because I can do that while, I walk around the house and the kids are in here or something. But I think just
Right.
pausing, figuring out what really brings you joy and then making it part of your routine. I'm
Yeah.
such a broken record with that, but I think it's so true.
I mean, but like I think one of the things that we get into our heads about is how being a broken record is how you actually create the habit,
Yeah.
right? Reminding yourself over and over and over, like in a group, in a community, in your day to day with sticky notes, whatever you have to do to kind of get into that repetitiveness, because that's what helps create the consistency. And
Yeah.
that's how we kind of get to a place of remembering like, oh yeah, this is what fills my cup. This is what helps me feel better. All those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So I love that. Okay, my friend, let's kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
One of the things that I ask everyone that kind of comes on the podcast are these 2 questions. The first is when it comes to like talking about inside out wellness, talking about our mental and emotional well-being, especially as women, why do you feel like it's so important for us to share our stories?
Yeah. I think like when I started with my health and wellness, I thought I told that story about sitting on the couch and watching my kids play. But really in the moment at the time, I was like, I just need to lose this baby weight. I don't think now in retrospect, I can look back and say, I needed the energy to be able to play with my kids. But at that moment, I was thinking like, I need to lose this baby weight so that I can, it had nothing to do with the baby weight, right? But that's the narrative we hear
Right.
so often. So I think sharing our stories and sharing our struggles helps people see that they're not alone. It helps them see that it can be beyond the physical. Because I
Yeah.
think, again, that narrative is what we've heard for years and years and years. And so to start changing that narrative, and I don't mean there's something wrong with starting because you want to lose weight, but I think that when you focus on your mental health, um, like at least sometime along the way, that's when change is truly going to happen or lasting change. So I think
Right.
the more we can share the narrative of beyond physical change and share our mental health struggles and our journeys, it's going to become the norm. And that's why people are going to then start instead of just wanting to lose weight. Oh, hey, I want the energy. I want to not struggle in my mind and anxiety every day. I want the steps you're using,
Right.
and just help it become the norm.
Yeah. Normalizing the whole conversation.
Yeah.
And I love that. So last question, my friend, before we kind of wrap it up and you share how everybody can connect with you and find you and all the things. One of the last questions I like to ask is when it comes to taking care of yourself, right? Reminding you how important time for yourself is. Do you have a favorite mindset quote or mantra or something that helps you remember how worth it time for you really is?
Yeah. I mean, Erin, I talk about joy so much, but I think that's because that's really what I feel like my goal for myself and for the people around me is. And so one basic thing that I always talk about is like joy is not based on circumstances. And
Right.
so I, uh, I mean, I will not go into all the details of the circumstances we have around us right now, but truly being able to find the joy regardless of the circumstances, the taking away the mindset of I'll be happy when, and figuring out how to be happy now while you work on those things. There's one that is, I'm trying to remember, like joy is the happiness that doesn't depend on what happens.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I just really, we've got house plans for this house. It's been 10 years, nothing has happened. If I were
Yeah.
waiting to be happy until this house was brand new and not this old farmhouse with like, I have to have the fireplace on, I'm freezing cold in here,
Right.
and I would have a really sad existence. And I think learning to have the fun and the joy and bring that energy to people while you work on your goals is going to change your life.
I love that. It's so good. Can you say that quote one more time? The joy is the happiness.
That doesn't depend on what happens.
Joy
I
is the
think it's
happiness that doesn't depend on what happens. I
I
love
think
that.
it's a Brene Brown quote, I think.
So good. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, so good. Natalie, I can't thank you enough for joining, for sharing your story, sharing your perspective, talking about joy, reminding us as women just how we deserve to feel good, right? We deserve to feel good and give ourselves that permission to take care of our health and wellness every single day in some capacity. So before we kind of end today, I'd love for you to share, how can people find you? How can people connect with you? Get information about your coaching groups and things like that.
Yeah. So I spend most of my time on Instagram. It's Natalie J. Richards.
Okay.
And that's, I do the Facebook, but not as much. So Natalie J. Richards on Instagram I'm just making sure that's right. Yep. That's the best spot.
Okay, awesome. You guys, if you have any questions for Natalie, don't hesitate to follow her, reach out to her. It has been such a joy to have you on the podcast today, Natalie. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Erin.
Talk to you soon.